Building a good UI for Android application is very essential. So in this video we are going to learn how to build a simple UI using Jetpack Compose in Android. There are two ways to build UI in Android application. First is the old method, which is use XML file to create a UI. In XML file we can create all the UI element using the XML layouts. And then there is a second method, which is the modern method, and it is much more popular, that is using Jetpack Compose. Jetpack Compose is a modern method to build UI in Android, especially in modern Android app development. So in this video we will be focusing all about Jetpack Compose and how to build simplest UI using Jetpack Compose in Android application. So with that said, let's get started. So what is Jetpack Compose? In Jetpack Compose, we create user interface using code instead of XML layouts. So in Jetpack Compose, there is a concept of composable function, which are Kotlin function. So what are composable function? What composable functions are simple UI building blocks which we use to build UI and UI hierarchies. They are like a small building blocks to build user interface. So let me show you a simple example. As you can see, this is the simplest example of how to create composable function to display a simple UI element, that is text, on the screen. So what I have done here is created a simple function named text component example, and then this function is made a composable function by adding @composable tag on top of the function. As soon as I add the tag @composable on the top of the function, this entire function becomes a composable function. And to see the preview, I have added the preview tag. After adding this preview tag, I can see the preview of this UI element on the right side of the Android Studio. Inside this composable function, I have added text UI element and then added the word hello world and then adjusted the font 15.sp. So this is how we create a simple UI using Jetpack Compose by creating a simple composable function. This is the smallest unit of building UI. Now before we move forward, let's discuss the basics of Jetpack Compose. Now let's understand what are the basic UI components used in Jetpack Compose. So these are the basic UI components which are used in Jetpack Compose to build any type of user interface. So in Jetpack Compose there are multiple layouts. There are column layout, row layout, box layout, LazyColumn and LazyRow. So in layouts there are three most important layout: column, row and box layout. In column layout, as you can see, we can stack our UI elements on top of each other. And in the row layout, we can arrange our UI elements side by side like in a horizontal line. And in a box layout, we can overlap UI element onto each other and stack upon them one upon another. So these are the three layouts which are used in Jetpack Compose. Apart from this, in case if you want to create a scrollable content, then there is something known as a LazyColumn layout. In LazyColumn, we can scroll the content vertically. And then there is a LazyRow layout. In the LazyRow layout, we can scroll the content horizontally instead of vertically. In this way, we can create any type of scrollable content using Jetpack Compose layouts. So these are the 5 layouts used in Jetpack Compose: column, row, box, LazyColumn and LazyRow. LazyColumn and LazyRow basically are the scrollable layouts, in which in LazyColumn we scroll the content vertically and in LazyRow we scroll content horizontally. So any type of user interface you are creating, you have to use this any one of these 4 layouts. Now let's learn about the UI elements. So there are 3 basic UI elements which are used in Jetpack Compose. And yes, there are multiple UI element used in Jetpack Compose and in Material 3 library, but all of the UI elements are simply variant of one of these 3. Example, the floating action button is simply a variable of a button, but it is still a button. Hence, I have used only these 3 UI element: text, image and button. So let's one by one understand each of this UI element and see example of how to use this element. Let's start with the text UI element. So this is how we simply create a text UI element. Remember that in Jetpack Compose, each and every UI element is in itself is a Jetpack Compose function, which is a composable function. If we click on the text, as you can see, the text in itself is also a composable function. And inside composable function, we are adding another composable function, text, because that's how Jetpack Compose work. The entire UI hierarchy is like a function under a function under a function. That's how we create a complicated large UI hierarchies in Jetpack Compose. So this is how we simply use the text Jetpack Compose function to add the text element on screen. And there are some variables which you need to add, such as text is equal to hello world, and you also need to adjust the font size in the text UI element. And remember to add these UI elements under a composable function. This is very important. Normal Kotlin function cannot render the UI. You need a composable function to render any type of UI element, whether that be text, image, button or any layouts. Now let's learn how to add the image UI element in Jetpack Compose. This is the simplest example of how to use image in Jetpack Compose. Create an image function and add the painter resource, and you add the image inside this. Now this image which I have used here is stored in a drawable folder which is stored under the resource folder, and hence we are using r.drawable.name of the image file. This is how we load the image file which is stored in a drawable folder. Second important is a content description. You need to add a description so that Android operating system will know what this image is all about. Here I have added null, but you can add any content description. You can add any content description like my Android photo or anything which describes your image. And then we need to add the modifier parameter and add the size of image which is 60.dp. So in modifier you can add multiple parameter. Like for example, you can add the padding, height, width, etc, etc. But to keep things simple, I have added only the size to adjust the size of the image. And this image widget or image function is stored under a Jetpack Composable function, just like previously. So this is how we create simple image UI in Jetpack Compose. Now let's move ahead and understand how to implement button in Jetpack Compose Android. So here is the simplest example of how to use Jetpack Compose in Android. Just like previously, I have added button, and inside this I have added a click event. This click event will be executed as soon as user click on the button. And then inside button I have added a simple text UI element to display the text. Now remember that whenever we add button, we also need to add the text UI element inside it to display the text. The text is simple hello world and the font size is 15.sp. And this is how we create a simple button UI element in Jetpack Compose. Now let me show you another example of how to use the layouts in Jetpack Compose to create a UI hierarchy. So let's learn it one by one. First, let's understand what are the columns. So to implement column in UI, I have created a simple example in which I have created a column, and then inside this column function, I have added three simple UI elements, which is a text UI element. And as you can see on the right side, in the preview, all these text elements are stacked upon one or upon each other in a column layout. So this is how we implement simple column layout in Jetpack Compose to create UI element in column format. Now let's see another example of a row layout instead of column. So here is a simple example of row layout. So I have created a simple row element, and inside the row I have added three simple text UI element which are arranged in a horizontal row format, as you can see on the right side. So this is an example of how to use the row UI element. Now let's move ahead and see example of a box layout element. So here I have created a box, and inside box I have added three simple text UI element just like previously. Now since I am using the box layout, all the text element which I have added inside this are simply overlapping onto each other, as you can see on the right side UI preview. So that's the purpose of box layout. Box layout will simply overlap entire UI elements on one upon each other. And I have added little bit padding in the text like 0, 8 and 13, so that we can see text a little bit far from each other and see the overlapping of the text onto each other. Now let's try to learn how to use the LazyColumn layout. So like I said previously, LazyColumn is used to create a scrollable view in Android Jetpack Compose. And to create a infinite scrollable view, first we will need a list. Now list can be anything, but to keep things simple, I have simply used the list of the fruit name, and we will use column layout to iterate through all the list and display the name of the fruit one by one inside a text UI element. So this is how we implement. First we create a LazyColumn, and then the important thing is we will need items. Now remember that in LazyColumn we will use items to load all the list item of fruits inside this item, and it will iterate through all the list and display one by one all the name of the fruits onto the screen. And as you can see on the right side, all the name of the fruits are displayed one by one in a column layout. Now this is a scrollable view, which means user can scroll through the list. Now since I have used the small list and this is preview, it is not scrollable in preview, but if we debug the application, we can see the scrolling of the entire view. So this is how we implement LazyColumn in Jetpack Compose. Now just like LazyColumn, here I have also implemented LazyRow. This is how we implement LazyRow. LazyRow and LazyColumn both have same implementation. The only difference is the orientation. In previously the LazyColumn, the orientation is a vertical, but in a LazyRow the orientation is a horizontal. So here in the LazyRow I have created a fruit list just like previously, and add this fruit list in items, and these items will iterate through all the fruit list one by one and display the name of fruit in a text UI element. Now each and every UI is arranged in a horizontal way, and it is scrollable if we debug the application. So this is how we implement horizontal and vertical LazyColumn and LazyRow in Android Jetpack Compose. So these are the basic UI components which you need to understand to build any type of UI in Jetpack Compose for Android. Now let's create a slightly complicated UI design using all of these basic UI components which we learned recently. So here I have created a simple example project to create a simple UI for Android. And to create a UI, first we will need our main activity, and inside main activity we will add set content and add this function main screen. Now main screen is a Jetpack Composable function. As you can see, this is a main Jetpack Composable function, and inside this function I have added material theme. Now keep in mind that material theme is important because in Android we build all the UI element using material design. In case if you want to create your own custom design, yes you can do it, but as a beginner I will always recommend to learn how to use material theme and material UI element to simplify entire user experience in Android devices. So we have created a material theme, and inside this material theme composable function we will add the scaffold. Now scaffold is very important because when we add the scaffold we make sure that our UI elements are not overlapping with the system UI. Like example, the status bar and the navigation bar. If we don't use scaffold, then it is possible that our UI will overlap with the system UI like status bar or navigation bar. Hence we use scaffold, and also scaffold is important to add any app bar or bottom fab button. Inside this scaffold we will add the surface. Surface simply means a background which is a pure white color. On this surface we will add our main UI which is card list. As you can see in preview, I have used the cards. This background with slightly tinted color, this is known as card in material design. I have added the card list and main UI here inside the surface. Now let's zoom in and understand how card list is made. So inside card list I have added a LazyColumn. Now because I have added LazyColumn, this entire list is scrollable, and inside this LazyColumn I have added items and sample data. So this is sample data of cards in which I have added title, summary and the image of each and every card, and then all of the data is added to the items, and items will iterate through the entire list, and we will get the individual item from that list as an item, which is a card item basically. And then we will pass on this item to the list item Jetpack Compose function which I have made to display the content of that item. And below there is little bit spacer which I have added to create a space between these two cards. So there will be a tiny space added between each and every card on the screen. Now let's zoom in into the list item. So list item in itself is also a Jetpack Composable function with a variable name item, and this item is a card item which is a data class which I have created at the bottom of the screen. Now card item is a data class. As you can see, I have created a card item here with title, summary and image. Now this data card is used to store the information for our cards, like example the title of the card, summary and the image of the card. Now let's go back to the item list. After receiving item, we will create a card layout. So here we have used the card layout. Now card layout is a component of Material 3 Android design. So this is how the card layout looks like in Material 3 Android design. This is the official website of Material 3, and there are three types of card: elevated card, filled card and outline card. We are using second type of card which is a filled card to show the UI in our application. Now let's come back to our UI. So first we have added the card, and inside the card we have added the row layout. So row layout will create a simple row to display our text as well as the title and the summary in our card, inside our card. And inside the row layout I have added image and the column. Now why I have added column is to arrange the title and summary in a column format, and this column is added inside the row column, and hence we are properly able to arrange our UI as per to our design. And then next is I have added a simple button. Now this simple button has a text element inside it named click me, and after clicking this button a simple toast will appear which says button clicked. But you can add any function or any code to execute as soon as a button is clicked. One more important thing in Jetpack Compose is each and every UI element there is a modifier parameter. As you can see everywhere there is a modifier parameter. So modifier parameter gives us extra features to adjust and modify their certain parameters such as alignment, padding, background color, etc, etc. So modifier parameter is a very handy and very important parameter to use in all the Jetpack Compose UI and UI elements. Now let's debug the application and open our Android virtual device. So this is how UI looks like after running Android application and debugging it. So when I click on the click me button, as you can see a simple toast appears button click. So this is how we implement simple button and multiple UI elements and create a larger complicated UI in Android, and you can use your own creativity to build any type of UI in Android. So I have tried to explain the concept of Jetpack Compose and UI using most simplest way as possible in this video. Now you can use your own creativity to build much more complicated and larger UI designs in Android application using Jetpack Compose. So that's it for today's video, and if you want to learn the fundamentals of Android app development, I have made entire video playlist to teach you the fundamentals of Android app development and teach you the entire fundamental concepts which are essential for you to build Android applications. The link to the playlist is given in description below. With that said, have a nice day, bye bye, see you in the next video. Thank you for watching.